report. I will turn that over.
Okay, so the policy report that you have in front of you is for the finance policy. And again, as periodically we've brought policies forward to the committee to review, this is a policy that's up for renewal within the 3-year term. And there has been consultation with Treasury in regards to formatting that policy. And it's just a regular review of that policy at this time.
So really, there's no, there is a recommendation that the revised finance policy dated for February 4th, 2016 for the Bruce County Museum and Cultural Center be approved. Do I have a mover and seconder? David? Paul? Were there any further discussions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would like to thank Council for allowing us to do a little bit of a shift in the schedule, because usually Museum is not right on after Council. And we have some guests with us here today. So we have Hugh Spencer and Robert Burnett, both from Museum Planning Partners. And this is the consulting firm that we had selected last year when we were going through our RFP process in order to do our accommodation plan, which, if you'll recall, it was part of the strategy in the Museum Strategic Plan, focusing on the optimization of use of space currently for the museum. So at this time, I'll turn it over both to Hugh and to Robert to go through the presentation that they have put forward for you.
Good morning. Thank you, Kathy. It's really actually quite an inspiring day to be here with you, with the cohorts getting their certificates and the youth and finding out the branding. So thank you. We're really excited to be here. I will start by saying that both Robert and I started the project with a little bit of trepidation, because Bruce County Museum and Cultural Center has a reputation as being one of the best practice leaders for community museums, not just in Ontario, but in Canada. So we figured we hoped we knew at least a little bit more than they did, but I'm not sure about that. But it's been a very productive and useful study, and I think it rendered some very useful results. One of the, as Kathy mentioned as she's introducing us with the accommodation plan, it reflects both the outstanding sort of product and and public experience you find at the museum, but also the highly professional and organized means of operation and planning for both the day-to-day operations of the museum, but also for its short-term and long-term future. And again, these are all very state-of-the-art and advanced. Someone once, in the course of our interviews of this study, referred to Bruce County Museum and Cultural Center as a big city museum in a smaller community, and I really feel that's sort of something that sort of sticks in my mind when I think of this study. Just to look at the key goals and objectives of this plan was to, again, optimization of the current footprint, which sounds a little bureaucratese, but it really means the best possible uses of that space. Looking at what space requirements the museum is going to need in the future. Look for improved space efficiency within the existing footprint. What can we do now without construction to do that? Looking at long-term space needs, how much space we need. As you know, museums are only sort of 50-50 propositions, in the sense they're 50% half public experience and 50% or less or more of storage, collection storage, offices, administration. So you have to plan for that back of house. To also look at how we could use adjacent buildings, and also looking at that are existing in the community, but also what are the opportunities for new building and those needs in Bruce County to help the museum in its future. We did basically sort of a 3-tier approach in this study. One was fairly extensive site visits by members of our consulting team, escorted by museum staff, looking at both on-site and off-site storage for collections, offices, administration, public areas. We also conducted, I think, probably close to 25 community and additional staff, administration, stakeholder interviews, really to get a sense of how people were using the building, where they saw the advantages and shortcomings of using the building and its facilities. And for the sake of brevity, I know you've been a meeting all morning, and we don't want to take up all your day, so it's really hard to cook down, say, the stakeholder interviews to these points, because there's very rich discussion, and what really showed up was, again, a high level of professionalism on the part of museum staff, but also a lot of commitment, regular uses and passion for the museum by members of the community. It's an active part of the community and people care about how they use those spaces. But we did find some spatial and functional challenges to look at. One is that there is a growing lack of storage space for collections and equipment. There's inconsistent uses of available space, and I don't mean to say that it's inconsistent because the people using the space are behaving inconsistently. It's more that it's a question of having to deal with both short-term and long-term challenges in terms of the pressure of space and the pressure of programming. Again, the museum offers a very high level of community and public programming in terms of film series, lecture series, the people, the special interest groups that meet and that do things there. And that requires equipment, it requires people, it requires collections. And when you have limited space, you sometimes have to use your problem-solving skills. They've done that quite well. But in terms of a long-term strategy, there are challenges there that do result in that word inconsistent. A lack of suitable programming space. In some cases, we identified people saying, this is a great program, it could be even better, or it could accommodate more people if we had more space or better access, and these things that came up in the discussions. What we identified as an underbuilt theater. We don't mean that it's a bad theater, and there's been some really excellent programming that happens in terms of film series. I think you're the only Ontario Community Museum that shows the Rocky Horror Picture Show on Halloween, and gets a good crowd. My dad, I wanted to go. But the main thing is that there are some limitations in terms of type of performances and events that you can hold there with that we know, and some access area. And what we identified as insufficient space for the archives. The archives, very active, well-used, well-loved facility in the community, and it's going to increase, only increase in the future. So that relates to our context. The museum has been really efficient in utilizing every possible space they can use. We didn't include any of the photographs we took on the site reviews, but there is a wonderful one of actually quite a good costume storage space that's in a rejigged washroom. I'm sorry, Kathy, if that embarrassed you to say that, but it's, shower, I'm sorry. It's beautiful, at least they'll be clean. But the main thing is that it's actually quite creative, and they're fairly stable, but the point is that, you know, they try to be as prudent as they can in finding innovative ways to do that, but at a certain point, you come to an end run. They've addressed some of the space challenges by renting off-site space, both in the adjacent public school and the off-site locations. That presents inherent challenges. You know, one is that will that space, those spaces in the public school always be available? How secure, you know, and just also how distant are the off-site facilities, that whenever the farther away you put something and the different sites you have, the more staff have to run around to find things and do things and work off-site. And it gets increasingly complex and not as efficient as centralizing it. Again, I would say that the Bruce County Museum, it's had recent renovations and expansion, relatively recent in sort of the world of museums. I don't know if in other words, a business 10 or 15 years is a long time, but in museums it's fairly recent. But it's kind of facing the consequences of its own success. You know, it's well used, it's got good attendance, it's got active programming. So after its renovation expansion, it's really reaching full capacity, and problems will result. We'd looked at the collections. I don't expect you to look at that. I have to say that they have Robert, you can jump in with this if you want, because you're involved with this as well, but I will say that one of the challenges of community museums and their collections in North America, or at least in Canada, is having how, as the 20th century continues, our industry and our lifestyle becomes increasingly standardized, and so they're not unique. And really what's happening with Bruce County, I find, is that they're quite intelligently sort of selecting those elements that it collects that really reflect the specifically unique things about the county more and more. However, even with that sort of, and they have, again, outstanding state-of-the-art collections management and acquisition and treatment programs as far as they can with their resources. But the collections are still going to grow. And that's the main area, and that would cause need for this accommodation study. Just to look at the archival research, these aren't unexpected in terms of the areas that people use archives. Everybody loves to research their family history. There's actually a wonderful book that I think all of you should read called The Presence of the Past. It talks about how nobody's interested in history until they find out they have a family or community connection to that history, and then they're suddenly passionately interested in it. And that's very much what you see here. But you do have elements of local history and marine history, military history, the small elements, but also an area of a small collection of First Nations history. Again, that may change. There may be greater areas where that grows in the future. I think the main area in terms of archives and collections is that you do have old corporations and businesses with their documentation sort of moving into the auspices of the museum, and that will have impact on the future of the museum. So we put this together, and we actually came up, looked at these factors, and worked out what sort of we thought the trends of the growth and use patterns for the museum and how it related to its space. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Robert, formerly of the Royal Ontario Museum, and probably has forgotten more than I'll ever know about space utilization and building facilities. And we came up with 5 different space optimization options for your consideration. Robert?
Good morning.
Good morning.
And again, thank you. I'll take my own water, thank you. The first option we looked at was an obvious one, to reduce one of the double height galleries to single height by installing a platform. Self-evident, I mean, it changes the nature, but it is doable, and it's 1,700 square feet gained within the existing footprint. The second one was to look at taking a double height space and using it in a slightly different way, using the double height as a different kind of gallery, as an open storage gallery, so there'd be a greater percentage of the collections on public display, and allowing for easy change by subject matter or by season with great density. So it's a high density, showcasing the things that are normally in the reserve collection. And all the options are in your notes. It's about 890 square feet repurposed. We looked at an option for building off-site, a collection center, similar to what Waterloo Regional, but much smaller. It allows for the opportunity to potentially work with other counties in a shared facility, the way you do with health services and others. It opens up opportunities for growth in the collections, both in the archives and in the material collections. It allows for greater climate control, specialized spaces for things like uniforms and textiles, as distinct from metal objects. Also allows for storage of large objects, which is always a challenge. We looked at the theater particularly because, as was noted, we believe it's underbuilt. The back-of-house green room facilities really don't allow it to be used for more than lecture or small set piece performance. The fact that when the theater is in use, you basically have to shut down the archives, because when you move the racks, it just vibrates right through the wall and you can't hear yourself in the theater. So there's a lot of reasons why we feel that theater space should be repurposed. Again, it's freeing about 1,600 square feet, which would be a goodly amount to address the issues of public programs. The last is to look to the archives, which is reaching capacity at the fastest rate, particularly when the decision was made to centralize all county records and municipal records and town records and other things. It's gone beyond its traditional use as sort of a collection of family history-related materials and societal materials to really being a corporate archive And that, of course, puts burden on it as well. And at some point, that'll have to be addressed. There's no real capacity to expand it in situ, so it's obviously something we looked at in great detail. That would free approximately 2,600 square feet for repurposing. In all of this, we looked at the strengths and weaknesses of each of the 5 options, and naturally they all come with strengths and weaknesses. They are not mutually exclusive. You could, for example, take, if we were going to move the theater and the archives together to an adjacent facility, maybe related to a library, there is increased strength and diminished negative impact. We would not say that would be true necessarily of integrating the platform option and the gallery option. The goal here in our view is it's about right-sized for galleries. Where it's really pressured is in public programmings, and we think that's where the growth area is for attendance and utilization, is in programming. We think the core functions of archives have to be addressed now. It's not a this year's concern, but it is certainly this cycle's concern. I'm not going to read this, you're perfectly capable of reading it. We also looked a little beyond the scope and said, well, there's a lot of adjacent land potentially available, and how might other facilities link with the Museum and Cultural Center? So we did a massing study of looking what would an adjacent library facility, perhaps incorporating a theater and or an archives, look like on the site. What would happen if we decided to have an academy or an innovation center on the site? What if we rebuilt the public school and increased its size to accommodate more students? We wanted to do a massing study to see whether or not any of that was even feasible, and that's what this massing study shows. It is feasible to have a number of other facilities linked into a cultural heart for Southampton and Bruce to some extent. You've all had the report, so I don't want to linger on just showing you what you've already read. These are massing assumptions. The library with 11,000 square foot, we took that space from the kinds of things that are being built in Lincoln or being built in other counties around Ontario, what an archives might look like or a new theater might look like. These are neither maximum nor minimums, they're just mean areas so that we could do the massing study. Our goal is simply to solicit your direction on which options we should consider and fully describe in the next phase of the report. What the physical implications are of those options you've identified, what the financial implications are, whether there are truly opportunities for partnerships and linkages which are consistent with your strategic goals and plans, and what is near and what is long term. Now, I know I went through that quickly, but I really think I want to get to the questions, because that's where I will get information which will advance the discussion. I thank you for inviting us today.
Thank you, Robert and Hugh. Questions for either or? Mike?
Thanks. A lot of information, and I think it's a great idea that we did this to look out some years. I don't know exactly where the answer is right now, but I think there's some good options here, and that they play with a number of different things around the school and the accommodation review and Saugeen Shore's desire to build or expand the library, build a new library, expand the library. So I think the trouble, I think, is we're really in the kind of the formative days of it, and I wonder how it unfolds from here. I don't disagree that you've been so successful that the museum is bursting at the seams almost, and that's a good thing. The difficulty is trying to solve this problem, and when there's a few moving things. But I'm not sure that helped you much, and I'm sorry for that, but I think our plan and our capital asset management plan says in 2018 that we would entertain, it is on our capital asset management plan to spend some money on the museum, if that helps any. Or not the museum, sorry, our library.
Library. Other questions, comments? Paul?
Will you be coming back with some costing on these items? The platform seems to be a logical way to lease cost out for the short term. Doesn't really solve our long term.
The challenge with the platform, sir, is it's one of the more expensive at around $2 million because you have to increase the HVAC and the lighting for the fact that you've created a new floor. And you have to change the foundations. The other big challenge with that is it is likely you'd have to close the museum for a period. And that could mean difficulty getting the clients you already have back. Now, you're right, it's an obvious solution, and that's why we've included it. It's a good solution, but again, it takes a bit of the gallery space, and cuts it vertically in half to create public program space. But public program space is what the museum needs. It needs public space because it has excellent programs, and we constantly heard, we wish we had more space.
So I guess where I was going with that, so does climate-controlled off-site storage open up more public space in the museum?
No, that addresses more the archives and the collections growth. The archives will hit its capacity first, mainly with the downloading of corporate records. The collections is growing more slowly, and there is some space within the collections to find some near-term additional space. The off-site storage solution addresses three other issues. It addresses the growth of archives because, particularly in corporate records, you don't need immediate access the way you would if you were doing family history, for example. If the archivist knows that some town or some committee needs to get to the records, they'll know it days in advance and can retrieve them without issue. If you come from Tobermory to do family history and the records are remote, clearly you're coming again. The same is true of collections. One of the challenges we've identified in here, and it's not a challenge currently tasked to the museum, but one which more and more has to be considered, and that is county-wide crisis. Certainly our work in other counties, a museum with a good collection is no longer sustainable. It usually falls to the county museum to take the orphaned collection or to manage that orphaned collection. Sometimes that happens in crisis. The roof is leaked, or there's been a fire, or there's been something. There is no capacity within the Bruce County Museum to find any space or any condition to allow that. That's I would say, mid to longer term, because we are seeing the closure of smaller museums, and certainly we faced that in Gray when we looked at the issue there. So the collection center is more midterm, free up some space in the building to allow those collections to be rationalized, to consider large storage, large objects, which could be industrial or agricultural, which currently can't be stored in the collections at all, but are represented in other museums in the county. Does that help, sir?
Yeah, somewhat. I guess I've, with great interest, looked at your documents there, and I don't think we should rule out an off-site climate-controlled storage facility. What kind of number do you have there if we supplied you the land?
Yeah, we looked at about $500,000, and it's highly scalable, up and down. The example we took of the best practice is the Waterloo Regional Center, and it's had 2 expansions since it was built. So you built it for immediate need. If you get a partner, say you go in with Gray and they're going to have some off-site, then you take that into account. If you're doing it alone, you don't. We're seeing somewhere around 5,000 square feet, 5,000 to 8,000 square feet start, divided into 2 areas, a wet and a dry. Organic material obviously needs a different climate than inorganic material, and textiles requires specialized treatment. Archives will require specialized treatment, photographs and things like that. It allows for extending the life of the existing facility, and allows for a little freeing up of what is capable of being collected. There's a challenge, particularly in the later part of the 20th century and in the early part of the 21st century, as we move from heavy industry into the information technology age. How do we obtain examples of large pieces of equipment? We have no capacity in the collections facilities now, and that may become an issue almost by surprise. By all means, challenge if I haven't answered the question fully, sir.
Other comments? Milt?
So I'm just looking at the recommendation here, and so staff will return with the further recommendations in the final report in March. So you're going to include in that report costings? Is that of these various options? Or
Yes, so basically, you've been presented, we've all been presented with a number of options, and the options all have strengths and weaknesses, right? So we really need to take a look at what would be a plan to move forward that we could bring forward to present to council. I would just like to reiterate that obviously this is long-term, again, similar to when we looked at undertaking the strategic plan. We're looking at that at a 5-year cycle. Obviously, part of the strategic plan was to look at how we utilize the space and optimization of the space. So this is not something that, is going to happen overnight. It's going to obviously take time, resources, and funding to do that, no matter what the model is moving forward. But I'm really pleased to see that there is a variety of options that we can really sit back and have a look at with your consultation as well, the comments that are being made, and then come forward in March with a preliminary proposal with some numbers, some high-level numbers, I would imagine, attached to that at that time.
Yeah, and like for myself, I'd like to visit the museum and walk through the various options
Absolutely, yeah.
that they're discussing, so that
Yeah.
we have a bit of an understanding.
I can show you the shower with the... No, but absolutely. I mean, at any point in time, I welcome any and all of you to come so that you can actually physically see how we're utilizing this space. And again, to Robert and Hugh's point, we were pretty, candid in terms of showing them all the spaces, and we are really optimizing everything to the point of we're utilizing spaces that's not the intent of what the space is, but because we are so constrained, especially on, the collection side as well as the archival side, but from a programming perspective, because in order to deliver programming, you have to have the resources to do that. And at this point in time, we don't have the proper storage space. I think it's been a really great process having the staff involved and also the consultation from a number of stakeholders. So we were grateful to have members of council sit as part of that consultation process as well. And then obviously members of the public, whether it was engagement from the library, there were members of library that participated, a member of library, as well as a number of other members. So we had stakeholder within the education system, so a teacher who actually uses the facility for her school programming. So it was, I'm very pleased at that from that perspective, that we did have a number of different people come together. It wasn't just an exercise in the staff coming forward and saying this is what we need. So,
Yeah, I guess maybe a walkthrough with council just to explain all the various options would be benefit to me anyway.
Okay. Yep.
Kelly?
If I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, there may be value in hosting, the museum hosting the committee meeting perhaps in April. The March date is self-imposed, so if we hosted the meeting at the museum, then we could do the walkthrough and allow for a fulsome discussion about the 5 options. From a staff perspective, it would be really helpful to get, in particular, the ones that from your vantage point are just non-starters. So, because there's no sense in us doing any in-depth analysis in terms of cost-benefit if, for all of you, you'll just never entertain that option. If there's interest in that, we can certainly set that up and have all the committee meetings at that time, should you wish.
Yeah, excuse me, I agree. March 4th is too tight, and take you up in your suggestion. So if there's no, sorry.
There's one more.
Just to understand then, Kelly, are you looking for the committee to take off, say, the bottom 3, that there's just no way that this committee would look at that option so that you don't have to put time into costing? And are you looking for that today, or are you?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be as after the April meeting, if committees support the idea of April. And then it allows for committee members to see all of the options and then have the dialogue.
Any further comments? Okay, so there is a staff recommendation, but we should amend that to April, whatever that date is.
Be the 6th, I think. The 1st is the Friday, so it would be the following. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
April
7th.
7th, so we will amend that recommendation to April the 7th. Do I have a mover and seconder? David, Mike, any further discussions on staff recommendation? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so this,
Next up, archives report.
Darlene, can I get you to get me out of here? Oh, never mind, I just did escape there, close that.
Oh, you're back.
And then we're back.
Right down here
Okay, and then
to-
you
You
should
should just be able to go down into, go down to your archives.
Okay. And then again, full screen. Okay, so we're moving right into the rest of the museum committee report, and the other items that are in the report are basically just information at this point in time. So in a nice segue into the archives report at this point, but just wanting to touch base on a couple of things from archives. A very successful year for the archives, as you've heard previously. It's being very well utilized, which is great. A number of partnerships, the Brewster Members org website had been launched, and as you can see in the report as well, a number of increase in terms of new researchers and researchers' visits as well. The other 2 websites to note in regards to the photo website is also increasing in terms of numbers and traffic coming to that site. So that's the archives report at this point. The business sponsorship report is something that we typically report on a monthly basis. And at this point, we're looking at 74% of the planned revenue as it pertains to sponsorship is confirmed at this time. So we're seeing really great return on sponsors, previous year sponsors continuing to support the program. So for example, an organization like the Society of Energy Professionals, they actually supported the implementation of the Lego partner and have been with us since the inception of that program. And there's a few new developments in terms of some other new partners coming on board, which is Seasons Retirement out of Owen Sound, and they will be moving forward with partnering with us on our Time to Remember, so our Remembrance Day programs in November. So we're continuing to move forward, and I would anticipate that we'd probably be very close to completion on that in the next few months. Education and outreach report, again, just find out that our final numbers are in for the year. You know, tremendous numbers in light of the fact that we were in a work-to-rule situation last year for most of the fall program or fall programming session. But a number of students have been participating, so 2,500 students have participated in educational programming as well as our children's programming, over 1,000 students with our Museum Mobile, and that is a program that we take out into the classrooms. And additionally, through that, usually with the children come the adults, so over 400 adults are accompanying these classes when they come in, because of course the schools need the volunteers and the parents are always helpful when coming with the students. So there we've got a couple of students from Ripley Huron doing a holiday traditions program. I spoke a little bit last council session about our Museum Munchkins program, and that is our newest programming in regards to the very, very young, so our preschool dynamic. And although the program had shifted a little bit, our initial intention of the program was to partner with Georgian College and have an ECE do a co-op program with us. We were unsuccessful in being able to have an ECE come to do the programming. We moved forward with the programming in light of that fact, and the program has met with tremendous success. It's been sold out. We have waiting lists for people, so every Friday morning this type of programming takes place in the museum space, and we have a number of different partners that we are working with. So we're working with the library in regards to a literacy component. We're working with some other special guests as it pertains to art, music, and health and wellness. So the success of this program, although we just piloted it, we already have people, like I said, that are on waiting lists, and people are already saying, when are you running it again? So we will do a full review of the program after it's been completed, and more than likely we will see this type of programming continue at the museum, and we're not sure at this point whether we'll run it twice a year or whether it will just be on a one time a year type of programming. And then we have our marketing report, and in the marketing report what we've wrapped up here is some of our digital statistics. So part of our strategic plan also speaks to a digital strategy, which we'll be working on. I'll be working on that in conjunction with the staff. And digital strategy means a lot of different things to a lot of people. So it's a fairly new concept when we talk about digital, because we talk about various assets. So they could be digital assets, or it could be processes, like if we wanted to do the gift shop online or things of that nature. So we're really starting to dig a little bit deeper into the technology aspect. Of course, with the technology aspect also comes some other challenges in terms of changing technology, being able to really understand the technology, and being able to understand how that makes it better for our patrons and our residents. So we will be, as we move forward with that, we'll be working quite closely with IT on that, because of course we're not the IT experts in that arena. But we do see strength and growth, 4.5% increase to the museum website. And the majority of the users, though, which was quite interesting, because we thought there would be a good shift into mobile, we're still seeing the users on the desktop space. So while we do have growth in the mobile and tablet segment, we're still seeing a lot of people are using their desktop. And it's kind of interesting. I think part of it is just because of the demographics. So if you have a family, they are still using the centralized computer to a certain degree at home. So there's some more stats in terms of the changes there. And then, of course, social media. So we are seeing strong growth in Facebook. That is one of our key KPIs, one of our key performance indicators that you'll be seeing next week in the 2016 business plan. But we are looking at how we can incorporate more social media. Twitter is a big one. But again, as we venture into these spaces, we want to make sure that we're utilizing the tools in an appropriate fashion, because these tools are not marketing tools. People often refer to them as marketing, but Facebook and Twitter are all about social engagement. So you have to be having that conversation back and forth with your audience, and that's really important. So we don't want to just use it as a marketing tool, because that's not the intent of those type of applications. But we are obviously still focused on that, and that will be a big part of our digital strategy moving forward as well. And that brings us to completion of the museum report.
Good, thank you, Kathy.
For this
Any
month.
comments or questions for Kathy? Okay, next meeting, March the 3rd. Need a mover for adjournment? Ann and Robert, all those in favor? Thank you.